Alright, so we're back. Started this a couple nights ago actually. Still have the plastic bag wrapped around it. Basically what that does, when you have really green wood that you're working with, you want to do whatever you can to kind of minimize the speed at which it dries. So a lot of times what we do in the shop is use a product called Anchor Seal. It's basically just a wax that you can paint on. It dries, it seals the grain nice. I've used melted candles before and just basically painted that onto the end grain. Get this unwrapped a little bit. And you can actually, you can't really probably see it, but the inside of the bag's really shiny. That's the moisture basically evaporating out of the piece of wood. And it clings to the inside of the bag, and it actually keeps a somewhat humid environment in there so that it basically slows that drying process down to minimize how much this actually cracks. So you can see I did a little bit of work after I shut the camera off last time. And basically what I did was I used the parting tool real quick just to plunge to where I've almost hit center, or not so much center, but a perfectly round spot at the base. And I actually plunged in at a couple different spots just to see how much I really needed to remove of this to get a nice round shape. So I know right there is just about the highest spot I have, and I've taken very little, if any, away from that. So I'm going to just do another little spin test. Looks really good. I think I'm going to adjust that just to get a little bit more of an area where I can use my tooling. Again, I have my speed relatively low, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. Obviously it's still off balance, so I'm going to come in nice and easy. And you can hear that tapping. It's still not, it's obviously not round yet. So we're just going to keep working on that until we get this roughed into a pretty round shape. That took a little bit, but what's really neat now, you can see the heartwood. I turned enough away that it's actually starting to show through. I'm a hair off center with where the heartwood was, so it's got this really neat patch coming through up here. And there's a little bit of streaking, like possibly where a knot or something was. There's a bigger knot up here, so I'm guessing maybe that's what that was. My next step, what I want to do real fast, I want to plunge a shoulder right here, and that's actually going to be the foot. When I'm ready to flip this around and start hollowing this, that I'm going to grip in the jaw chuck. So I'm going to grab my parting tool. I'm going to readjust. And we're going to go ahead and plunge that. What I like to do first, I like to just kind of set where I want my depth to be. And all I'm going to do, I just want to check to see how far away from how deep my jaws are. They're a ½ inch deep. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go off of that point right there, the kind of the lowest point I have. Grab a pencil here. That's pretty good. I'm going to go a bit more than a ½ inch though, just to make sure I have what I need. I can always take off a little bit later. I'm just going to lay my pencil there. All right. All right there. You can actually see that that huge knot that was almost looked like a big chunk taken out. We've got just about all of that out. Now the one thing I am seeing, however, is looks like I've got almost like a bark inclusion there. So we're gonna have to see how that actually turns out when I'm ready to flip this the other way. A few things I have to do before I am actually ready to start hollowing this out. Number one, I really need to kind of finalize my design. Basically this video's been from a tree to a bowl / turned vessel. Again, it's from one of a couple apple trees I dropped in my yard. My wife had said she didn't want me to burn all of it, and she didn't want me to get rid of all the wood. She wanted something made out of it that we could kind of keep from the trees that were in the yard. So right now what I'm kind of thinking, just because it looks like there's some rough spots, what I might do is make a flower pot out of this. And no, we've talked in class before, I'm not actually going to put soil in this. I'm not actually going to put water in it. What this is going to be, this is basically going to be a container to put a flower pot into. So it looks like it's in there, but the water, soil, all that stuff isn't going to be inside of this, rotting the inside out just from the constant moisture and dampness in there. Plus, finish really wouldn't hold up either. So I'm going to kind of see what happens here. I'm seeing a little bit of a chunk taken out. I want to get a little bit less in my diameter there, see if that's going to pose a problem before I really finalize this design. And one thing I always tell you at school, I want to have as little of this spindle sticking out as possible. Well, right now, it's necessary for me to have a little bit extra of this spindle sticking out, just for the simple reason I want to be able to get this tool rest as close to this foot as I can. And the fact that I had so little of this sticking out was making it kind of difficult to accomplish that. So I'm going to make sure I'm still not touching. That looks good. Back to my parting tool. The one thing I'm going to do slightly is do a little bit of an undercut like we usually do in class. That way this outer edge is the high spot. I really don't have to worry about it wobbling once I part this off at the base. And right there I actually used the skew to basically put a bit of an angle here, because these jaws that actually are going to grip this eventually are dovetail jaws. So this will actually provide a mechanical lock. If something would knock it loose, this would help hold it in place until I shut the machine off and went back to it. Now, you know, we started out with a rough log. The one thing about turning is a lot of times it is roughly 80 to 90% waste. So you can see just a pile of shavings I have already. And we haven't even started hollowing this bowl out yet. They're about, a couple inches, the shavings are a couple inches higher than my ankles right now here in the shop. Now, it's kind of getting late. Tomorrow is the first day of spring gobbler season here in Pennsylvania. As we said in our video last week, you know, tomorrow the dual state holiday, opener of walleye and spring turkey. So I'm going to call it quits for the night in order to celebrate the holidays tomorrow. So we'll get back to it hopefully tomorrow evening. Alright everyone, so last time I got the rough shape of the outer part of this turned vessel, this flower pot, kind of roughed in, just a roughly finished shape. What I want to do in this video, we're going to actually rough hollow out this. We can't actually complete this with this video. That's the old 10 o'clock cup of coffee for you right there. Because it's still green. So this will have to dry after we're done. So I actually don't take this to my finished thickness. I'm probably going to try to leave about a ½ inch of wall thickness down this. That way it's not so much that it's going to take a real long time to dry out, but it's not so thin that it's going to crack or really not allow me to correct anything, any warp that might happen in the drying process. So the first thing I want to do is I have a pretty large spade bit, it's 1.5 inches. We're going to open up just the center of this bowl just to make a little bit less material to get rid of. It's always a great idea if you have that something like that handy, because it's just going to save you a bit of work in the long run. So you can see right there, the bowl's been flipped around. That foot that I made, it fit nicely into the jaw chuck. Right now, I'm actually going to slide my tailstock in. It has that bit on it. I'm going to lock it down. Before I start, obviously, what I tell everyone in shop class, I'm going to roll these long sleeves up. It's a little cool in the shop tonight, so got the old checkered shirt on, we're ready to go. So, this spade bit, I don't want to go extremely fast with the speed of my lathe, so I'm going to fire this up and then I'm going to slow it down a little bit while I hog this material out. see right there, about 1.5 inch hole. It's actually fairly warm in there, not only from just the heat of actually drilling, but you can also feel it's almost a little bit of steam coming out because that wood is so damp. Which brings us to another good point. If you are doing any green woodworking on your tools, one thing you want to make sure you remember to do, not only clean them off after you use them, but also wipe them with a little bit of WD-40, PB Blast or something like that, just to put a little bit of oil on it to help keep it from rusting. So, right there, that looks pretty good to me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my live center back in the tailstock, and I'm going to do a little trick that I've done in the shop before. The hole's larger than my live center, but I still want to do a little bit of shaping on the outside of this. Tennis ball is going to fit really nice there. And while it might not give me quite as much support as, say, driving the live center straight in there, that's going to give me enough support so that it's not really knocking my work off balance. Alrighty, so I have a decent cavity opened up in here. What I want to do right now real fast, since I've been putting some pressure on it, I want to actually check and look to see if this has come away from the jaws any, and it hasn't. And I also want to just check to make sure this is still tight. Everything feels good. Now the one thing about this is a little bit harder going, just because I'm actually using the end grain of this piece of wood instead of the face grain. The end grain's a lot tougher to cut. Sharp tools help a lot. Real quick, I'm just honing my chisel. But it's still, if you've done anything with an end grain in shop or anything like that, you know it's a little bit tougher going when you're trying to cut that out. That's why my shavings look more like sawdust than an actual like shaving. If this was coming into the edge of the bowl, it would almost look like a snake jumping out of this bowl, the ribbons of material that would be coming out, especially since it's green wood. We got a few floaters in the old coffee mug, but that's a little extra fiber. Just so you can see, I'm taking cuts in the center and slowly working my way out, trying to hit this. That's probably about a 5/8 wall thickness out here is my rough wall thickness, just to kind of where I want to end up before I'm ready to let this dry out for a while. Now we got it off, we're going to adjust this. I want to try to keep the tool rest as close to the material as we can without touching. That way we don't have too much of the chisel overhanging. So right there you can see a fairly concentric bowl cut in here. And to be honest with you, if you look, that's basically that bowl-shaped top of this vessel. Now I'm ready to kind of reverse how I'm cutting and hollow out this sweep that's a little bit lower. So we got to adjust our tool rest again to allow myself to get a little bit deeper in there without actually hitting the sides of this. So again, quick spin, nothing's hitting. Now one thing I forgot to say, what am I using now, since I obviously switched from that Olin tool that I made to something different. This is an inside bowl scraper. And usually what this is used for is this would be used for like finish work. You can see it's extremely thick. It's like 3/8 to a 1/2 inch thick. It's got a pretty good curve to it, but again, it's not an extremely steep angle. It's a scraper. With green end grain, I've found this does extremely well. I got this one from, I think it's Hurricane Tools. I know other companies make these, but I think this is about the cheapest that I've found one, and the steel seems to be fairly good. It holds up, the steel holds an edge just as long as some of the better chisels I've used. So I'm really happy with how it works. Alright, so I'm pretty happy as far as just a roughed out bowl or flower pot, whatever it's going to be, for what I have right now. So all I'm going to do is real fast, I'm going to true up the outside because it did get a little bit knocked out of balance with all the work. Alright, so what we have right there is our rough turned. It's still damp, I can still feel moisture coming off my fingers. Apple, I guess you could use it as a vase. I was kind of thinking flower pot. We'll see what happens basically. And again, if you didn't hear on one of the earlier videos, not actually putting soil or water in this. That's just going to lead to decaying and rotting. I'm going to get a line or maybe a plastic flower pot to fit in there, or if I'm going to use it as a vase, just like a glass bowl or a small glass vase that will fit in there. And this will just kind of be a holder for that. But I'm pretty pleased with how this turned out. End grain obviously is harder to bore out than coming in from the side of something like on the turkey call. We're coming into that edge or the face of that. Similar to something like one of these turkey calls, or like most bowls that usually we do turn in the shop. Most of what even I've done are the face grain bowls. Right at the end, a little off balance in one or two spots, got a little bit of tear out. Once this dries, it's going to go back on the lathe, and we're going to try to clean that up. And again, the nice thing, I left between a 1/2 inch and 5/8 of wall thickness on here. That way I have plenty to work with when it comes time that this is dry enough that I'll be able to finish it, sand it up, and get an actual oil coat, maybe a lacquer finish on it to kind of shine it up a little bit. Ooh. There's a little bit too big of a chunk of fiber in the coffee floating there. Small amounts are good. Bulk amounts, not so great. So don't leave your coffee cup near where you're working. I hope you enjoyed the video of kind of making this bowl. I'll post an update video once it's dry and get it finished so you can kind of see what goes into that. Until then, Spruce Hollow Woodworks, Mr. Boer here. We'll see you next week. Hope you're staying well and staying busy. No floaters in that one. Have a good night.